Well, it's 7:02, so I think we will go ahead and get started and assume that others will be able to join us as they arrive and log in to the webinar, which is the way we have this set up today. I'm Karen Trout. I'm the Community Engagement Librarian at Kalamazoo Public Library, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here to hear and see Michael Zadoorian, Detroit-based author. We're happy to have him with us to talk about his newest book. And before he does that, let me just give you a little bit of information about him. Michael Zadoorian is the critically praised author of Beautiful Music, as well as The Leisure Seeker, which is the basis for the 2018 Sony Pictures Classics film starring Helen Mirren and Donald Sutherland. He's a recipient of many awards, including the Kresge Artist Fellowship in the Literary Arts, the Great Lakes Colleges Association, I just lost my way, New Writers Award, and the Michigan Notable Book Award. His other books, here he is, are Secondhand, a novel, and the story collection, The Lost Tiki Palaces of Detroit, something that might be familiar to you if you've read the newest book. His work has appeared in the Literary Review, Beloit Fiction Journal, American Short Fiction, Witness, Great Lakes Review, North American Review, Detroit Noir, and the Huffington Post. And the best sentence of his bio, all of that is very impressive, but I love this last sentence. A lifetime resident of the Detroit area, he lives with his wife in a 1937 bungalow filled with cats and objects that used to be in the houses of other people. The Narcissism of Small Differences is his latest novel. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Karen. I actually did not mean to start my video so quickly in the middle of the introduction. I was going to go on after, sort of discreetly pop on, and then I must have just left my finger on it too. So I had to sit there through my introduction, which is endlessly sort of like uncomfortable.
Well, but you're why people are here, so I think that's perfectly appropriate. So Michael's going to read a little bit for us from his newest book, but before he does, I just thought people might be interested in knowing a little bit about the origin of that book. How did it come to be?
Well, there's actually there's a pretty long origin story too, like sort of a Batman length kind of it's a strange sort of thing. I'll give you some of that a little bit. The book takes place in Detroit of 2009, and so now, I mean, it's a period piece, but what people might not know is that that's pretty much when I wrote the book. I wrote it probably from about 2007 to 2009, and I did not mean it to be at the time. It
Yeah.
was a current day book, but the publishing world had different plans for that book, and I actually wound up writing a piece about it, about the journey of the book in LitHub, and but the sort of short version is that all the editors that it was submitted to had all kinds of nice things to say, but no one actually wanted to pick up kind of a love story that takes place in a what was then a really blighted kind of city that was having all kinds of serious problems at that time in 2009. And I think maybe the idea of sort of a comedy of manners that took place in Detroit might have just been too much for some. It's like, you can't have that in Detroit, creative people and that kind of stuff. And but so I had to put the book away for basically 10 years.
Wow.
And but somehow my editor at Akashic, they had just published Beautiful Music, and I happened to mention this book that had been in the drawer, the virtual drawer, for 10 years. And my editor said, "Yeah, that sounds interesting. I'd like to see that." And they picked it up. And so I think it was interesting to just have that notion of, I think maybe the world was maybe a little bit more ready for this kind of book about Detroit, because Detroit's really a character in it.
Right.
And
It sure is.
yeah, so it was kind of cool to have that strange sort of, journey for the book. Not one that I would recommend to other writers. It's like, yeah, crestfallen, put it away for 10 years, and then accidentally mention it to your your new editor. And but at least, it was a kind of happy ending, and I'm thrilled that they picked up the book and published it. And so we won't get into the other way that the
Okay.
book feels cursed, having come out during a pandemic. And we'll just ignore that part of the origin
That's right.
story.
That's right. Well, and I
But
should tell our audience this was originally scheduled to be an in-person visit that we had scheduled, and we're grateful to you for doing it anyway online. And I want to do one quick housekeeping thing for people that may not know, and I think this is correct, but if you go to the upper right-hand corner of Michael's screen and click on the pin video option, I don't know if you can see me and our other facilitator, excuse me, panelist from KPL. But if you don't want to see us, you can pin Michael's video, and then he'll be the only person that you
that,
see.
that seems so harsh, Karen. If you don't want to look at us,
Yes,
fine.
that's right. But with that, I invite you to go ahead and launch into your reading, and we'll have time for questions. And you can just put your
Cool.
questions in the chat, and I will try to monitor those and make sure we don't miss any. And we'll jump right in.
Kevin is quipping from the chat room. Yeah, okay. I will. I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't think I know how to pin myself. Is that just pin video?
Yeah.
What will happen, I wonder? Okay, there we go. All right. Well, thanks to everybody for joining us tonight. So yeah, I'm going to read from this book, The Narcissism of Small Differences, which recently came out from Akashic Books. And it's a comic novel. I think at the heart of it is really the story of a relationship, but it's also about all kinds of other things: love and work, selling out and buying in, kind of the cost of compromise, the death of irony. There's urban ruins in the book, tiki, and definitely Detroit. Detroit is definitely a character in it, but above all, it is the story of a relationship, I think. So I'm going to read a couple of selections from the book, which, as I mentioned, takes place in Detroit in 2009. The two main characters are Joe and Anna, a couple who have been together for quite a while, and over the course of the book, as they approach middle age, the big 4-0, they kind of experience what you might call a couple's identity crisis. So I'm going to start from the very beginning of the book. So here it is. Chapter 1, The Two of Them. Are we weird? Joe closed his eyes and sighed. Not another one of these conversations. I don't know, Anna, he said, his voice belying a complete lack of enthusiasm in this subject. What do you mean by weird? She was sitting on the floor of the living room of their townhouse, leaning back against the couch. She scooted her knees up until they were under her chin. I don't know. Weird. Joe was perched on a 60s lowboy chair directly across from her, paging through the latest edition of the Detroit Independent, the local alternative newspaper for which he wrote. He had wanted to look over the piece he had written on the works of Donald Goines, Detroit's bard of blaxploitation, but instead he was doomed to have this conversation. Look, why don't you just tell me what weird is, and I'll tell you if we're it. I don't know. He folded the newspaper and tossed it in a vintage black wire magazine rack. Okay, what's up? I don't know. I just feel like we're weird. Really? He said. I don't know what to tell you, Anna, but trust me, we are definitely not weird. There are lots of people who actually live different, crazy, interesting, weird lives. They go live on ashrams or tour with Sun Ra tribute bands. They travel the world seeking knowledge. They go tripping on Yahe with a shaman in the Amazon. We, on the other hand, have jobs. You know, we live in the suburbs. We go to Target, for Christ's sake. We are nowhere near weird. In fact, it kind of makes me sad to think of how not weird we are. Anna's turn to sigh this time. Well, I disagree. First off, Ferndale isn't some affluent suburb. We're a mile from Detroit. And I don't know if you have what could actually be considered a job. He was going to ignore that last comment. Fine then. I guess we're weird. Maybe this would end if he just agreed with her. Yeah, I think people think we're weird because we've been shacked up for 15 years. She was not letting him off easily. That's not weird, Anna. That's monogamy. Very common and non-weird. I don't know. It's a little weird. Another loud exhalation. Is that it? You want to get married? Anna peered at him over her glasses, brow canted above the smallish cat-eye frames, as if he had just casually suggested a murder-suicide pact. Joe usually thought she looked wonderful in glasses, until she did that. No, she said. Why in God's name would we need to get married? He shrugged. I don't know, because that's what most people consider normal. She laid her head back on the cushion of the couch and gazed up at the ceiling. People have an extremely low tolerance for weird, Anna, he said. They think that everything that's not exactly like them is weird. Trust me, we're disgustingly normal. She looked at him. Please stop talking, Joe. What? What do you want me to say? If we are what passes for weird, then the world is in big trouble. Anna sighed again. I don't know. Just forget it. I'm going upstairs to read. After she left, Joe had an unsettled feeling in his stomach, a burning that only a couple of beers would help extinguish. Chapter 2. The Law of Random Sync. Anna did not know why she was saying these things. She didn't used to worry about being weird. Weird used to be a good thing, something she aspired to, but never really achieved. She was really just felt like complaining about something. It was true that she didn't feel normal. She felt in between, in a boring, helpless, semi-contented, semi-disgruntled place. Neither here nor there, in a kind of no woman's land of the psyche. Maybe she felt this way after 10 years in a cramped two-bedroom townhouse in Ferndale, getting more cramped by the day, what with Joe's pack rat tendencies seemingly getting worse as he got older, making her worry that the two of them would someday be found dead after some sort of Collier Brothers hoarder avalanche. Maybe it was her still bringing in the bulk of the income for the two of them, which admittedly was irritating her more and more these days. Maybe it was the fact that Joe seemed to be walling himself off from her lately, out boozing with his friends or falling asleep on the couch and not coming to bed till it was practically time to get up. Either that or getting up so early there was little chance for face-to-face time, no time in bed, no time to talk about what was going on in their lives. Anna missed it when they used to cobble together a dinner out of what was in the fridge or pantry, open a bottle of cheap wine, light a candle, and sit at the table all night, just talking. It seemed like years since they had done that. And it seemed like it had been years since they had done that, and most every night had been like that at the beginning, at least when they weren't going out to some show or event or to meet up with friends. There had been a lot going on back then. Maybe it was just their youth or that particular moment in Detroit or the fact that she had just gotten started in advertising and going out every night was just what everyone did at the time. In fact, it was how she and Joe had met, at a party at a photographer's loft in Eastern Market, someone with whom Anna had just shot one of her very first print ads. The photographer, Michelle, had set up a makeshift set so she could shoot Polaroid portraits of all the guests. Anna had sat down on the so tacky it was fabulous crimson crushed velvet couch from Lasky's in Hamtramck to wait for her friend Lena, who hadn't shown up yet. So Michelle the photographer told Joe, who was sitting nearby, to sit down next to Anna. Joe looked around and behind him as if she couldn't possibly be talking to him. I'm sorry, excuse me? Sit down next to her, said Michelle, who was obviously accustomed to arranging people and personalities for photographic purposes. Joe continued to bumble and stammer. Oh, okay. He plopped down on the other side of the couch. What's your name? Said Michelle. Joe, he said, blushing furiously. Okay, Joe, move over closer to Anna. Joe scooted over, looking worriedly at Anna, as if he was concerned about violating her personal space. That's better. That's it. Good. Now, look interesting. The resulting Polaroid revealed Anna covering her mouth in faux shock and Joe with eyes frozen wide and mouth slightly agape. A photo that, when viewed now, with its slightly faded color and mottled edges, gave that moment and the life together that followed a retro feel, a strange anachronistic sense of mid-century spontaneity. When Joe saw the photo, he said in a deadpan, "Well, I definitely look interesting." Anna nodded, trying to keep from laughing. "Yes, very interesting. You look freshly taxidermied." Joe glanced up from the photo and smiled at her. Lena still hadn't appeared, so they walked over near the bar to look at Michelle's fine art photography. Gritty but respectful portraits of the men and women who sold fruits and vegetables at the market. After 5 minutes of talking to this sweet young man with the floppy dark hair and furry secondhand cardigan, who was talking too fast, so excited about everything, about photography, music, art, and suddenly, obviously, about her, Anna was already feeling something. She felt relieved. Yes, definitely relief. Was that strange? Was that actually love she was feeling right then, 5 minutes after meeting the guy? Probably not. It was way too easy to look back at these things through a soft focus romantic lens and think that. Yet at that moment, she had known she was capable of loving him. Anna was just getting started as a junior art director, and while working on her first television commercial, she heard a term from a producer that she couldn't help but to apply to her and Joe: the law of random sync, which meant that when you put a piece of existing music up against a rough cut of a commercial, sometimes, just once in a while, everything accidentally matched perfectly. All the beats were there, the music changed at just the right points in the edit, even the energy was right, as if the music was scored specifically for the commercial. Yet it wasn't. It was all pure chance, but everything fit just right. That was the way it had felt between her and Joe, physically and every other way. They had randomly been thrown together, and somehow everything fit. Chapter 3. The Midlands. Once settled at the bar, Joe shed his Carhartt but kept his beanie on, which he'd been doing more lately, since his hairline had started its slow but steady decampment northward. Still recovering from the icy walk, he treated himself to a Bell's Two-Hearted Ale and began to read his book, Revolutionary Road. After a short while, his stomach started to calm as the beer worked its magic on those troublesome centers of his brain. Joe loved reading about messed up bourgeois types, and the novel felt like even more proof that what was deemed normal wasn't necessarily good. He couldn't stop thinking about their conversation. Weird indeed. It was disgusting how normal he and Anna were. Of course, their families didn't think so. He knew that there was much shaking of heads, aggravated exclamations of, well, I just don't know, among the respective parents. Living together for 15 years without matrimony, procreation, or a mortgage seemed to bewilder most Michigan parents. To them, he and Anna existed in some state of suspended maturation and would do so for the rest of their selfish, soon-to-be middle-aged, progeny-free lives. He started to read the next page, but was distracted by a flyer on the bar. It read, "The Midlands presents Chintiki Night, our annual rite of spring Polynesian celebration. Zombies, Mai Tais, poo-poos, exotica music by DJ Dave from Detroit. Mark your calendars." It was for the Midlands' yearly spring Chintiki party, where the local bohos shed their winter parkas, donned aloha shirts, grass skirts, and coconut bras, all to ironically celebrate the arrival of spring. It was a big deal in Ferndale. A few years ago, Joe had written a feature on Detroit's burgeoning underground tiki culture and had completely fallen under the sway of the whole wonderfully ridiculous idea of it. Looking at the flyer, he also couldn't help thinking of what fueled the popularity of tiki culture in post-war America. The repression and conformity of the times, i.e., being too normal. Tiki was a way for gray flannel types to shed their inhibitions, go native, and get weird. Uninhibited boozing, semi-erotic dancing to faux exotic music, gaudy flowered shirts, sticky finger foods, unclad maiden flesh, and phallic tiki idols. At one point, Detroit had 3 Polynesian palaces, but when the city started bleeding honkies after the '67 race riot, all of them eventually closed. Only one building was even still standing, albeit shuttered, the Chintiki, after which this shindig was named. Joe had gone for the past 2 years. It was always filled with interesting people. Artists, musicians, performers, writers, filmmakers, zinesters, photographers, drag queens, performance artists, aging punk rockers, sundry eccentrics, all people whose normalcy Anna might call into question. Joe picked up the flyer and couldn't help but to wonder, should you be going to tiki parties in your 40s? Was it possible to maintain ironic distance for that long, or should you have outgrown it by then? How long before you needed an irony supplement? Still, he got the distinct feeling that his peers, many of whom were younger than him, but already feeling old and out of it, weren't going to give up a damn thing. They would happily take irony into old age and off to the graves with them. End of reading.
All right, thank you so much. Go ahead.
No, nothing. I was just going to try and figure out how to unpin my own video. Let's see. Oh, nope, that didn't work.
Well,
all right then.
You're the main attraction, so.
Okay, all right. So it's just me being the biggest one feels weird. Yeah, so that always has felt like kind of those are truncated versions of those first 3 chapters, but a good way into the book, I think. So
I appreciate the humor. I appreciate all of the references to things that we all know and love, like Belle's Two Hearted and just all the creative references. Those were some of the things that I really enjoyed as I continued reading the book.
Yeah, I think that was a little bit of what I was talking about before too. One of the things I brought up in that article I wrote for LitHub was just that it was interesting to write about the creative community in Detroit, just because I think that Detroit does not get any credit. I think it's a very, very creative place. There's so many artists and poets and various types of music, so many musicians and rappers and poets, and it's just overflowing with creativity. And I think that might have been also one of the things that, I mean, the story, a story about creative people doing trying to survive in a city certainly is nothing new.
Right.
But to have it's usually in some sort of place like New York or San Francisco or Los Angeles or something. Those are the places people expect to be creative, I guess. I don't
Right.
know. So I think that was another one of those things that felt weird for a while. And and there's creative people never stopped coming out of Detroit and doing work
That's right.
here. So it was fun to write about that community in Detroit too. Just to and I'm always saying this. It's like, do we really need another a novel about New Yorkers? Really? Do we? Because there's so many of them, and that was one of the things, and that often comes up about like the film version of The Leisure Seeker,
Mhm.
just that they had that was probably the first thing that really struck me. The director had sent me the script totally out of courtesy. I'd really nothing to do with the film, but they were kind enough to send the script really just as a courtesy, and here's what we're doing with it. And I know the director was not looking for notes like from the writer of really, and all the novelist becomes is just the creator of the source material.
Yes.
And so nonetheless, I wrote him and I said, it really bums me out that this is not taking place the characters are no longer from Detroit or Michigan or even the Midwest.
Mhm.
They had to become Easterners,
Mhm.
and I kind of know the reasons why, I suppose, that I won't go into, but it's still it really bummed me out.
Well,
Just to no end.
I'm curious, what were the reasons?
Well, and I think this is one of those things you have to also just kind of make your peace with when as a novelist, you're fortunate enough to have your work sold to the movies.
Mhm.
Is that they're going to do whatever they want to do with it unless you are actively involved, and even if the writer of the source material is actively involved, that they'll still do whatever they want essentially.
Mhm.
But one of the things I had to come to terms with was that The Leisure Seeker was just like a really kind of personal book for me. All my books are personal anyway, but that one was particularly personal, being that I had written it shortly after my father passed away. He also had Alzheimer's, and so it felt personal to me. And as I read the script, once I was done, like throwing the script down in anger, um, I sort of realized that someone else, one of the screenwriters or all the screenwriters, I think there were four altogether, that, someone had put in their own kind of personal details to make the story personal for them. And I do truly think that's what happened. And I know that one of the screenwriters was from the Boston area. And I was like, okay, he was just trying to, you know, you make it his in a way,
Right.
make, the film script his in a way that he could feel close to it. And that's how I kind of, that's how I kind of came to terms with it. And I also met the guy, and he was super nice, and
Yeah.
everybody that worked on the film was really nice. And it was uh, another interesting origin story there too. And please tell me if you interrupt me if you just want to ask
No,
me something. But
go right ahead.
you know, the book became a movie because of the book's popularity in Italy. It was my it was pretty much a bestseller in Italy, and my Italian editor knew the production company
Oh my,
of a very successful Italian filmmaker, Paolo Verze, uh, and they passed it along to him or his people, and he read it and decided that would be his first English language film.
ah,
So crazy. So that's how it came about. You know, when I first signed my publication contract with HarperCollins, they had put in like a special. I mean, it had already been optioned when I signed my contract, and there was a production company attached, and he was really working to try and get some traction for The Leisure Seeker to be a film. And this was 2009, and nothing really ever came of it. So their option, you know, kind of expired, and really not much happened until about gosh, I think I first heard about this in 2016 when I heard from the Italian production company
oh,
that they wanted to, you know, do that. And it still took a good year and a half or more to even to get the wheels rolling. And even then, I was not involved. Just every once in a while, every
mhm.
6 months or so, I would get an email from uh, Apollo Verze's people saying Paulo is still interested in making The Leisure Seeker his next film. And yeah, and okay, great, you know,
Yeah,
and then they would renew the option, which is always nice for the writer too, because you get some
exactly,
money. You get some
exactly.
money, and then yeah, and then one day I was, you know, one morning I just kind of got up. I was just going through my email, and got there was an email, a press release from the Cannes Film Festival, where Paulo Verze was premiering his newest film, and they decided to announce that his next film would be The Leisure Seeker, starring Helen Mirren and Donald Sutherland. And
Wow.
I knew nothing about any of the stars, nothing about that it was even still happening. I suspected it was still happening, but so that was really surprising.
Yeah.
It's a surprising email to get before your coffee. Let's just put it that way. You
Yeah.
know, it's like I just called my wife, who was on her computer in the other room, and it's like, would you read this email, please, Rita? And yeah,
Wow.
and she confirmed, yes. So that, yeah, pretty weird, stunning, surreal kind of
I can
morning, and it continued to be surreal as things rolled along too.
imagine. We have a question here from an
Okay.
anonymous attendee who is asking, do the industrial and financial legacy of 20th century Detroit play a role in your work?
It certainly does in, you know, it does probably in all my books, I think. Just, you know, Detroit, even in The Leisure Seeker, which doesn't really take place in Detroit, but the main characters are two 80-year-olds that, you know, were born and raised in Detroit and lived there all their lives. So Detroit is, and its history is kind of writ large in their histories. So it's pretty much in all my books, definitely in my first novel, Secondhand, which there's a lot of things I used to enjoy going traveling around back when back when I used to be able to have book tours and
Yeah.
things like that, traveling around and reading about Detroit and places like Hamtramck, things like that, to out of, you know, to audiences in Austin or San Francisco or something like that. And
Mhm.
so yeah, it does. And certainly very much so in my last book, Beautiful Music, too, which takes place in you know, the sort of the late 60s, early 70s, right after the, you know, the uprising of 1967. And you know, so yeah, it's there. And I mean, I just tend to to write. You know, I keep writing about this place, and I mean, I'm sure part of it is just from it's because it's where I'm from and I've lived here all my life. But
Write what you know.
yeah, and I certainly do that. But it took me a long time to realize that, you know, being from a place like Detroit was its own kind of gift, I think, to a creative writer. You know, it took me a while to realize that, but that's when it felt like my writing started to feel like my writing, as opposed to just, you know, when you first start writing, you tend to imitate other writers, and I was writing a lot of Raymond Carver type stories, and when I started writing about where I was from is when the writing started feeling like me.
Yeah. Here's a question. As someone who follows you on Instagram and enjoys the shots of Michiana, any plans for a travel log?
Like a sort of a blog, or just you know, I mean, probably the closest I will come to a travelogue was probably the Leisure Seeker. I mean, that was what a great trip that was. It was
Mhm.
just such you know, and I mean, I wrote the book before I took and the couple, John and Ella, wind up going down Route 66 from Detroit to Chicago, and they start Route 66 at Lake Michigan and take it all the way to its terminus at in Santa Monica, California. And but you know, I'd written the book and was able to craft a pretty credible you know, journey, just from there's so much information and lore and history about you know, Route 66, which is the route they take. And you know, and in some ways that's part of the history of America too, but it's also very much part of the history of Detroit, in my opinion, just because, as you know, one of the very first, or the very first, you know, cross country highway. I mean, that changed, you know, that came about because of the automobile, and the automobile came about, you know, Detroit. So, so Detroit's generally there in one way or another, and I like it that way. Not that I wouldn't write something that didn't have anything to do with Detroit. It just seems to be an important touchstone for me and my work, I think.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? You can type them in the chat or in the Q&A box there, which that's where the first question came from.
Yes, don't be shy. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot of uncomfortable Zooming going on. Us just sitting here like, you know, this, but yeah.
Yeah. Nina, I see that you have your hand raised. Let me see if I can, did you, sorry, I have to
Oh,
figure.
wait, I'm seeing something here. I'm Q&A. Where did I go to school? I see a question here from an anonymous attendee. I like all this anonymity. It makes me feel kind of dangerous, like I have readers who are part of the federal witness protection program. But where did I go to school? I went to Wayne State, and it is that became a big part of, I think, really who I was, who I, you know, or who I am as you know, a person from the Detroit area, but also, you know, I went there as an undergraduate, and then about 10 years later, I went back for my master's degree, and to when I started to really become serious about writing, I I took a long sabbatical from my job and started going back to school, and just I had been secretly writing short stories up in the attic of we had an old flat, and I would go up there in the mornings before I went to work, and write short stories, and I didn't really tell anybody about it. My wife knew about it, and that was about it, but she was cool and didn't press me on it. And so I went back to Wayne State when I was ready to sort of show my work to some people and see how that, you know, what would come of that. And it was great. I mean, Wayne State doesn't have any sort of traditional MFA program, and and ultimately for the kind of person I am, and my personality type, I think it was a good thing for me. I'm not so sure I could have survived an MFA program, frankly, one of those brutal ones where, I've heard, I know somebody who went to the Iowa Writers Workshop, and they said that, Jesus, there was like, it felt like there was blood on the walls after they would take apart someone's story, and it's like, I don't I don't know if I could have done that, frankly. I think so it was kind of better for me to just toil on my own, and then I had a couple of great authors sort of encouraging me and looking at my work and saying, yeah, you should keep doing this. One of whom was Charles Baxter. And that was his last semester at Wayne State. And then he went over to U of M, where he was there for quite a while. And now I think he is in Minneapolis, I want to say. But nonetheless, it was great to have a teacher of that caliber, and that was Wayne State. So I lucked out, and but I just kept writing, and that was probably one of the important things. Is to that's one of the hardest things, is just because there's so much rejection, and and I found that out once I once I started sending my stories out. It was a fair number of years before anything got accepted, but it was okay, because I don't know, I had by that time I sort of had some confidence, but and I think that's because of Wayne State. Oh, suddenly the Q&A column is filling
Right,
up here.
right. I just want to make sure that Nina got what she needed. She had raised her hand, and
Okay, I'm sorry, Nina. Do we know what
Oh, yes, I
Nina's?
did. Thank you.
Oh,
okay,
okay.
welcome.
Um, let's see. Saw Joanne ask, what is the significance of the title? There is, yeah, the that it's kind of interesting. God, I've got a lot of origin stories tonight. Sheesh. But the book had a couple of different titles, and as you know, it was a 10-year journey. So the name of the book changed a few times, including once it was accepted for publication. Um, we had, the title I'd had on it was. Actually, it was called Broken Hipsters, which pops up in the book as a kind of way to just talk about aging creative people, really, with a little allusion to osteoporosis. Um, but we sort of felt like maybe hipster had taken on kind of a dirty, kind of a bad connotation, actually. So I started coming up with names. I just generated a bunch of names and sent them to my editor, and we would talk about them. And I had a whole stack of them. And I'd always been interested in that kind of, the theory of, the narcissism of small differences, which I believe is from Freud, and to kind of talk about basically uh, border wars between two peoples that are essentially the exact same people, even ethnically, and often, but maybe there's just some slight difference, and they hate each other's guts, and for some reason that felt a little bit like this book. uh and it's a little bit making fun of the characters, maybe, but it's also I think just making fun of people in general, because I do feel like sometimes, we, especially in America, we all want to think of ourselves as so unique and so different, and some of that is true, and sometimes I just think we're all the same bunch of you know kind of messes, but with different clothes. And so it just kind of felt like a good title for this book. And so yeah, it doesn't pop up in the book at all, but it felt like the book. So that's as random as these things can sometimes be, and but people seem to react to that title. So I think that's what my editor liked about it, and yeah, and they continue to. I do get asked about it a lot. I don't know if it's from a place of like, how did you come up with the title? Because I hate it. So, but in any case, I think I saw some other questions there, and it was, oh, do I have an agent? Yes, I do have an agent. And I like my agent, but I will say this, the literary game being what it was. Did I call it the literary game? Ooh, sorry. Um, you know, the literary world being what it is, it's hard out there. And this is and I like him very much, and he's my fourth agent though. And stuff happens, you know, people, you know, they'll love your one book and then not like the next one, or just they don't know how to market it, or things like that. So so people move on, or you know, I'll move on from somebody. It's all happened at this point. My current person is someone. This is the first time I've had the same person for two books in a row, because before that it was like, okay, every book was a different editor, a different publisher, and a different agent. So in a lot of ways, each book felt like it was kind of starting over, which is not the feeling you want, really. Yeah, yeah, which explains a little bit why there was 9 years between my first and second novel, and 9 years between my second and third novel. So it's not because it takes 9 years for me to write a book. It just sometimes it takes a long time to get one published. So yes, agents are helpful, and if you can, you know, and it's a lot easier to get them these days. To Well, maybe it's not easier to get them, but it's a lot easier to contact them. Let's put it that way, because you know, when it was all snail mail, you know, it took a long time, and you know, there was physical query letters and all that stuff, and now it's really you know, an email, and you can just you know, they can get back in touch with you, you know, practically immediately, or they can ignore you too, which is often, you know, the new rejection is just silence. But yeah, so, but it can be helpful if you're out there. It is helpful if you're out there trying to sell any kind of book, really. I think I remembered one other question from that, which was, what am I working on now?
Yes.
And you know, it's a good question, because you know, I think I know what I'm working on. I'm working on it's kind of I would call it the spiritual sequel to my last book, A Beautiful Music, which you know, is about a young boy who kind of has a sort of, you know, not the most stable of upbringings, basically, and stuff happens and gets some bad breaks, and basically music kind of, he discovers rock and roll music, and it kind of helps him to survive, and also sort of even gives him a purpose in a lot of ways. And it's very much that story. I kind of wanted to write a sort of almost famous kind of coming of age through music, and and that's where that's how that book came about. But the book I had originally started to write was not beautiful, was not about about a character in his teens and his childhood in Detroit in the 70s, but it was about an older disc jockey, and that is essentially the book I'm writing now. It's Danny, like 40 years later, after working in the radio world for a long time.
Ah,
And so we'll see. It is I like to call it the sequel that America didn't ask for, but I'm writing it anyway. And so we'll see. I'm hoping they'll someone will be interested in it, but you really, again, you never can tell with publishing. But I am hopeful, and I think I'll be done with it by the end of the year. So we'll
Okay.
see what happens. And I'm hoping for it to not go into a drawer for 10 years, because, you know, how much time do I really have? Let's face it.
Right.
Uh, anyway, so that's what I'm working on. Yeah,
I don't know if
but
you, Kevin's question, he's wondering if you've made a Spotify playlist of songs from beautiful music.
I have not, but one exists. My Italian publisher, bless their hearts, they did a Spotify playlist of almost all the songs on beautiful music. I think it is predominantly rock, but they may have some of the easy listening stuff on there too. It's on my website. The link to it is on my website. I want to say under the media column,
Great.
but yeah, so it's really cool that they did that. And I was thrilled that they did. It's kind of fun. It's long too, but there's a lot of songs mentioned.
Are there any other questions from our participants, our attendees?
I'm noticing we've had a loyal 11 people all along. Usually the number will fluctuate. It'll go up. It'll go down. This has
Yes.
been a solid 11. I'd like to commend you all for sticking with this. Because it's so easy to cut out of these things. So thanks.
Well, thank you. We are grateful to you for your time and for hearing a little bit more about and hearing actual chapters from Narcissism of Small Differences.
All
Thanks so
right.
much.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody.
All right.
And
Bye-bye.
thanks to, okay, see ya.
Yeah.
Okay, bye.